Again, thank you for coming. Get seated here. Okay. I'll start all over. Thank you for coming. I'm very grateful for this opportunity. Today we will talk about the fourth presentation, Our Lord Returns. There are 5 topics that will be discussed. Why must Jesus return? Biblical paradigms, historical parallels, a chosen land, and the life of Father Moon. The first one, why must Jesus return? Jesus' mission on the cross was victorious. Nevertheless, he still wanted to say and do many things. To say many things. In other words, as we've mentioned in the first lecture, a new theology, a new wine, but the unchanging logos. And in that context, if we look in the Bible, Jesus said we must put new wine into new wineskin, means new truth. I have yet many things to say to you, he had said, and we shall meet face to face and understand fully. So Jesus wanted to say more. He also wanted to do more. My Father, if it possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as thou wilt. Why did Jesus pray this prayer? Let this cup pass. Not because he was weak, timid, or afraid. Not because of the physical pain of suffering on the cross. Not because of a sudden or unexpected turn of events. Why, then, did he pray this prayer? Jesus prayed this prayer because he did not want God's painful, broken heart to be prolonged any longer. If I can stay on earth and fulfill my mission, I will do it. Jesus knew that his people, Israel, would go through untold suffering. And Jesus did not want humankind to languish under Satan's dominion. Jesus must return to reveal more truth, for the marriage of the Lamb, to conceive God's lineage here on earth, to solve the original sin, and to build God's long-awaited kingdom. He must come here on earth. He must. Biblical paradigms. In Revelations chapter 2 and 3, Jesus visited John of Patmos and instructed him to write 7 letters. The letters were to 7 churches in western Anatolia. Jesus indicated that he would bequeath, he would give the victory of his life to a very special man. In each case, Jesus bestowed blessings to, quote, he who conquers. This man would inherit Jesus' power, authority, and position. God's providence would continue through the unity of these 2 people, Jesus and he who conquers. Let's look at those 7 letters in part. Ephesus. To him who conquers, I, Jesus, will grant to eat of the tree of life. Smyrna. Jesus says, he who conquers shall not be hurt by the second death. Pergamum. To him who conquers, I, Jesus, will give some of the hidden manna, and I will give him a white stone and a new name. Thyatira, Jesus said, he who conquers and who keeps my word until the end, I will give him power over the nations, and he shall rule them with a rod of iron, even as I myself have received power from my Father, I will give him the morning star. Sardis. He who conquers shall be clad thus in white garments, and I, Jesus, will not blot out his name from the book of life. I will confess his name before my Father and before the angels. Philadelphia. He who conquers, I, Jesus, will give him the pillar in the temple of my God. Laodicea. He who conquers, I, Jesus, will grant him to sit with me on my throne as I myself conquered and sat down with my Father on his throne. What must he who conquers conquer? First, he must conquer himself. Like Jesus, he must have a burning passion to do God's will, to be able to inherit the heart and spirit of our Lord Jesus Christ. This man must have an indomitable spirit, a selfless soul, ready to sacrifice anything and everything for God's will, as Jesus did on the cross. Second, he who conquers must also have dominion over and conquer the world of the Spirit. He must empathize with God's heart and freely communicate with Jesus and with other saints. Jesus promised to work with him, teach him many things, and give him his power, his authority. Jesus will bequeath, will give his victory on the cross to he who conquers. He wants to give that. He's waiting to give that. What if Jesus did not go the way of the cross as Peter suggested? In that case, Jesus would have no victory to bequeath to anyone. Jesus' victory on the cross protected his status as God's only begotten Son. His crucifixion safeguarded the foundation for his messiahship, which could then be bequeathed to he who conquers. Wow. So, the value of the cross, the value of Jesus' sacrifice on the cross, we talked about it yesterday. It protects the 4,000-year history of the Old Testament. It opens the new world-level providence for Christianity. And now we find another value of the cross. It safeguards Jesus' only begotten sonship. How important was the cross of Jesus? The manner of the second coming, a biblical precedent. A biblical precedent. Let's look. Elijah, ascension. Elijah went up into heaven in a whirlwind. 2 Kings, it talks about this. And the expectation is that Elijah will return. I will send you Elijah before the day of the coming of the Lord in Malachi. So Elijah was taken up in a whirlwind. They were expecting him to come. How was that? 900 years before Christ, Elijah was taken up in a whirlwind. Therefore, the Jewish people, the Jewish expectation is that Elijah will return on the clouds. That didn't happen. Instead, John the Baptist will go before him in the spirit and power of Elijah. This is what the angel told John's father, Zechariah. And Jesus said, if you are willing to accept it, he, John the Baptist, is Elijah who is to come. And again, Jesus said, but I tell you that Elijah has already come. Then the disciples understood he was speaking to them of John the Baptist. How did Elijah return? This is a biblical precedent. The spirit of Elijah returned, cooperated with John the Baptist to fulfill his mission and prepare the people for the coming Messiah. This spiritual cooperation was the way in which Elijah returned. Another man born on earth with the same mission. Again, a biblical precedent. Well, let's apply that to the second coming of Jesus. 2,000 years ago, Christian theology says Jesus ascended into the clouds. And so the Christian expectation, like the Jewish expectation, was that he would return from the clouds. However, the second advent must take place on earth. God's will must be accomplished on earth. Otherwise, God is a failure. The three blessings must be fulfilled on earth. God's lineage must be established on earth. Sin must be solved on earth. The second coming must take place on earth. Since death came through a man, the resurrection of the dead comes through a man on earth. So even though the Christians have this expectation that Jesus will return on the clouds, that will not happen. What will happen? Jesus will return spiritually and bequeath or give his power and authority to he who conquers, to that man. In other words, spiritual cooperation. Another man born on earth with the same mission. This is how the second coming will take place. Why did they look into heaven in Acts? Men of Galilee, said the angel. Why do you stand looking into heaven? This Jesus, who was taken from you into heaven, will come in the same way as you saw him go into heaven. What does that mean? Well, the angel was not encouraging the disciples to continue looking up to the sky for the return of Jesus. In fact, he was challenging them. This chapter, go back and read the beginning, the first verse. This chapter begins recounting all that Jesus began to do and teach, not just the moment of his resurrection. In other words, this is the account of Jesus' life and public ministry. The angel reprimands them, saying that this Jesus will come in the same way as you saw him go into heaven, not from the clouds, but based on his life, his birth, his physical responsibility, his victory over persecution, and undaunted love for God. That's how Jesus will come again. What is the meaning of coming on the clouds? Then the angel said to me, the waters you saw where the prostitute sits are people, multitudes, nations, and languages. So in this case, water is impure. It represents fallen people. And when this water evaporates, it becomes a cloud, pure water. So the evaporation is the cleansing process. So he will come on the clouds. That's what the Bible says in Hebrews 12:1. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, those cloud of witnesses were Noah, Jacob, and Moses. The cloud represents people of faith who have been cleansed and purified by following and believing in Jesus. Jesus will return to bequeath his victory to his successor on earth, to he who conquers. Jesus will support, guide, teach, and encourage him in this spiritual cooperation. That took place Easter morning, 1935, in Korea. Jesus came to Father Moon and asked him to complete his earthly mission. The first time Jesus asked, Father Moon said, no. Why? I can't do it. The mission is too big. Jesus came back a second time. Please, you must fulfill God's will on earth. I will work with you. Again, Father Moon said no. Why? If Father Moon makes the commitment himself, then he can change his commitment. But if he makes a promise to someone else, he can't break that promise. So he didn't want to make the commitment of fear of having to break the promise later. So he said no. Jesus came back a third time. And Father Moon said yes. His reasoning, if I say no, someone else will have to suffer. This is a suffering mission. I cannot make someone else suffer by not taking this mission? And he said, yes. Let's read from Father's own words this encounter in 1935. My encounter with Jesus changed my life completely. His sorrowful expression was etched into my heart as if it had been branded there. I could not think of anything else. From that day on, I immersed myself completely in the Word of God. I embraced new words of truth that Jesus was giving me directly, and let myself be completely captivated by God. On those days when my prayers and dedication connected to heaven, Jesus appeared to me without fail and conveyed special messages. If I were earnest in my desire to know something, Jesus would appear with a gentle expression and give me answers of truth. His words were always on the mark, and they struck deep into my bosom like sharp arrows. These were not mere words. They were revelations about the creation of the universe and opened the door to a new world. When Jesus spoke, it seemed like a soft breeze, but I took his words to heart and prayed with an earnestness strong enough to uproot a tree. Gradually, I came into a new realization about God's purpose in creating the universe and his principles of creation. The relationship between Jesus and Father Moon is like the founder of a company and the CEO. Thank you, President Horry, for this. The founder is one and unchanging. That is Jesus. He is the first and only begotten Son. The CEO has the same authority, power, and responsibility as the founder. That is Father Moon. When he who conquers, then the founder can bequeath to the CEO full responsibility to manage the company. They must work together to make the company, Christianity, successful. To be clear, Father Moon is not Jesus. Father Moon did not try to replace Jesus. Father Moon did not seek out this mission from kind of self-aggrandizement, as it might be. Father Moon accepted his mission the third time Jesus asked. Historical parallels. This particular part was very interesting by the Christians in the Philippines when I taught that. This was a highlight to them, because we don't go into the Old Testament history, but we'll talk a little bit about it here. Providential parallels. When history is ready to receive the Messiah, it will be like a pregnant woman. I'm laughing because our daughter's due date is yesterday. So we're expecting. And when a pregnant woman is ready to deliver a child, there will be a flurry of activity. They've bought the car seats. They have the bags packed to go to the hospital. Oh, activities in all spheres of life, religion, culture, science, politics, art, medicine, in both the central and the correlate histories. The purpose is to prepare for the birth and worldwide mission of the Messiah and his bride. The national level providence of restoration. There are 6 parallel periods between the national level foundation for the Messiah in Judaism and the world level foundation in Christianity. The national level foundation begins with Israel's 400-year period of slavery in Egypt and concludes with the coming of Israel. And this is that period. We will go into detail. The world level foundation for Christianity. The world level foundation for the Messiah's second coming, centering on Christianity, begins with Jesus' crucifixion and concludes with the end of World War I. This war laid the world-level foundation for the second advent of the Messiah. For that time, the dispensation of the second coming commenced. And we'll now see the parallels between these two providential histories. I'll go into detail, but let's go quickly. The 400 years of slavery in Egypt and the 400 years persecution in Rome. The 400-year period of Judges, starting with Moses, and the 400-year period of Judges with St. Augustine. The 120-year United Kingdom under Saul, David, and Solomon, and the 120-year United Kingdom under Charlemagne and his three grandchildren. 3 generations, 3 grandsons. The divided kingdom between northern and southern Israel for 400 years, and the divided kingdom between East and West Franks in Europe. 210-year Jewish captivity and return parallels the 210-year papal captivity and return from the Vatican into Avignon, France. And the 400-year preparation from Ezra and Malachi, preparing for the Messiah, and the 400-year preparation period from Luther and Calvin, preparing for the second coming. Let's look at each one in more detail. The first 400-year period. The 400 years of slavery in Egypt. This was indemnity for Abraham's mistake. He did not cut the dove and the pigeon. Jacob had 12 sons and 70 kinsmen. They were freed from the bondage of slavery in Egypt, and then they were supposed to build the tabernacle. They had the tabernacle, they were supposed to build the temple and the nation of Israel. This was the foundation for the Messiah on the national level. In the 400-year persecution from Rome, this was indemnity for crucifying Jesus, the fault of the first covenant that we talked about yesterday. Jesus had 12 disciples and 70 apostles. In 313 AD, Constantine recognized Christianity. In 382 AD, the New Testament was canonized in the Council of Rome. And in 392, under Emperor Theodosius, Christianity became the state religion. This was preparation, a national level foundation for the second coming. The 400-year period of Judges and the 400-year period of the patriarchs. The 400-year period of Judges, Moses gave them the Jewish law, the 10 Commandments. Under Joshua, the Israelites were able to enter Canaan, ultimately. They would set up a new system of judges where the judges would be prophets, priests, and kings. And they would establish a Jewish feudal society. Later, ultimately, they failed to exalt the tabernacle. In the patriarchal period of Christianity, St. Augustine began vindicating Christianity with the book that he wrote, City of God. Christianity spread to the Germanic tribes. It was set up a system of patriarchs, and the mission of these leaders were monks, popes, and kings. It established the Christian feudal society. Christian leaders ultimately, sadly, failed to exalt a temple. The 120 year of the United Kingdom under Saul, David, and Solomon, paralleling the United Kingdom of Charlemagne, Charles the Great. The United Kingdom, the prophet Samuel anointed Saul the first king of Israel 800 years after Abraham. The model of the temple, based on the tabernacle, was given to Moses. When they were traveling in the desert, they had the tabernacle. When they finally went into Egypt, they were supposed to build a temple based on that same model. There were 3 generations, Saul, David, and Solomon. King Saul disobeyed the commands of God given by the prophet Samuel. King Saul and King Solomon built a temple, but fell into lust and foreign wives. The kingdom was divided. Pope Leo III crowned Charlemagne the first Christian emperor in the year 800 AD on Christmas Day. This was the model of the Christian state given by St. Augustine's City of God. Charlemagne's empire lasted for 3 generations. The kings did not remain obedient to God's will. There was disunity between Pope Leo and King Charlemagne, and the Christian empire divided. The 400 years of divided kingdom. The Jewish kingdom was divided. This was Israel. In northern Israel, the Cain-type division, there were 10 tribes and 19 kings over 260 years, but no king was righteous. God sent many prophets to try and bring reformations, Elijah, Elisha, Jonah, Hosea, Amos, to try and bring about reformations. There was no repentance. The Assyrians invaded northern Israel. In southern kingdom of Judah, the Abel type, there were 2 tribes, 20 kings, lasting 394 years, and many were righteous. God sent 4 great and 12 small prophets at this time. The Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar destroyed the temple, and the Jews were exiled. They didn't unite. West Francia, or France, these are descendants of Charlemagne, were in bitter and constant conflict with East Franks, Germany, and Italy. The Holy Roman Empire composed those 2. God sent St. Thomas Aquinas and St. Francis of Assisi to bring reformations. The papacy and the church did not repent. And the Abyssinian Caliph, which allowed Christians to come and worship in Israel, was taken by the Seljuk Turks. Christians went to try and reclaim the Holy Land. There were 8 crusades. All of them failed, including the last crusade, the Children's Crusade. The papal captivity as the Vatican was moved from Avignon from the Vatican to Avignon. Sorry about that. The 210-year Jewish captivity and return, and the 210-year papal captivity and return. King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon captured Israel and remained captive for 70 years. Then King Cyrus of Persia defeated King Nebuchadnezzar and freed the Jews. Over the next 140 years, the Jews returned to their homeland. Israel united as a nation, rebuilding the temple. This is called the Second Temple period, the reinvigoration of the Jewish faith, founder of religious reformations by Ezra and Malachi, and the beginning for the preparation for the coming of the Messiah. Similarly, in Christian history, in 309, Pope Clement V moved the papacy to Avignon, France. The relationship between the Italians and the French were antagonistic, so it was a captivity. In 373, Pope Gregory XI returned the papacy to Rome 7 decades later. At one point, there were 3 popes ruling simultaneously. A great schism continued into the next century. Protestant reformations brought about by Luther and Calvin began the Reformations. The Renaissance began the external preparation for the second coming. The 400-year period for the Messiah and the 400-year period for preparation for the second coming. Within the nation of Israel, the Jews returned to Babylon, and Judaism was reborn. Ezra returned from exile, rebuilt the temple, and reformed Judaism. Malachi prepared to receive the Messiah with the prophecy that Elijah would return. Externally, they were persecuted by the Persians, the Greeks, the Egyptians, and the Romans, but a worldwide foundation was established. Actually, this is called what we call an axial period of history, where Buddha and Mahavira reformed Buddhism in India, Socrates and Plato, and Aristotle in the Middle East, Confucius and Lao Tzu. Why? Because when God sends the Messiah, he will send the Messiah to one nation, but for the world. So there should be a world preparation for that, and we see that taking place. The Vatican was returned to Rome, and Christianity was reborn. Luther in 1517 brought about the religious reformations, putting faith back into the Bible. Calvin in 1543 submitted the necessity for reforming the church, and the Holy Roman Empire for church revival and the institution of marriage was renewed. This is an important part. I'll talk about it later. There was internal struggle for 30 years, and 8 million people were killed. My wife's family comes from this area in Austria, northern Austria. The war just continued. It went way beyond 30 years. But there was a worldwide preparation for Renaissance, political, economic, cultural, science, rapid development externally, again to receive the Lord of the Second Advent and the only begotten daughter. An amazing set of parallels between the Jewish and Christian histories we have seen. Behind those parallels, God's providence of restoration or salvation is being conducted. The main purpose is to establish the foundation for the Messiah and his bride, the new seed for God-centered lineage. Father Moon said this, "If you carefully examine the progress of human history, you will undoubtedly discover God's resolve and the fingerprints he left as he tirelessly worked behind the scenes." God is a loving parent. We have seen the parental heart of God in the affairs of human history. God has not abandoned, ignored, or been separate from human history. He is a caring and loving parent who will not violate his principles to prevent the fall, nor to restore his children. He must work by principles. We did not see God because we did not know his principles. In the divine principle, you are invited to study more fully this history and the universal principles as they are explained there. So, as we look more carefully, we can look at this last 400-year period, from the time of Luther and Calvin until the end of World War I. That period lasted 400 years. That is the time period, kind of the shortest time period. Well, the earliest the Messiah could come would be when this 400-year period is complete, 1917. The condition for the Messiah to come was fulfilled 1 year later at the end of World War I, which ended in 1918. If we look at the larger picture, the entire world-level foundation, and add up each of these years, the 400 years of persecution, the 400 years of patriarchs, the 120 years of the United Kingdom, 400 years of divided kingdom, 210 years of the papal captivity, and the 400-year preparation period. We get the latest. In other words, when will the second coming take place? Between 1917 and 1930. But you can imagine God is desperate, so it would probably be closer to the beginning of this period of time. A chosen land. Why were Father and Mother Moon born in Korea? God prepared Korea in a special way. First, it's a history of faith through suffering. If you look at the Korean history, it is a history that has been lasting 4,300 years, but it has been invaded 900 times. Do the math. Almost every 5 years, the Korean history has a war or a struggle going on. The Koreans have a name for that. The shrimp among the fighting whales. That's the idiom that is used in Korea. They never attacked another nation. And they maintained faith in God in this adversity. God was Hananim, Hana, one. The one God, the respected one. Mother Moon said this, "A nation had been prepared. It was my husband who discovered that for God to bring forth his only begotten daughter, he needed to find a nation that had endured injustice for over 5,000 years. And that was now fulfilled with devout Christians. That nation is Korea. From ancient times, Koreans wore white clothing as they revered God and their forefathers and loved peace." Second, all religions have flourished, most recently Protestantism. In 1903 to 1907 was called the Pyongyang Revival. It lasted 5 years. These were revivals that took place initially in the capital of North Korea, Pyongyang, and rapidly expanded to all of Korea. Pyongyang was called at that time the Jerusalem of the East. In 1905, of course, there's going to be a confrontation. Following the Japanese victory of the Russo-Japanese War in 1904 and 1905, Korea became a protectorate of Imperial Japan. Persecution followed. The first and largest of many protests for Korean independence lasting 1 year, approximately 2 million Koreans participated in more than 1,500 demonstrations. 7,000 people died. Birthplace of the world religions. If you look about it, there are kind of two areas where the world's religions emerge. One is in the Far East, and you've got the Oriental religions, and the other is in the Middle East. The Middle Eastern religions have monotheism as their base. That's where their emphasis there. In the religions of the East, it's more emphasis on God, on human beings, their responsibility, not so much on God. What happened if those two religions worked together?
Perfect.
Yeah. So God wanted that to happen. Let's see how that should have taken place. In the Roman Empire, Jesus was sent to Israel. If he had been accepted, he would have gone east. Why? That's where Babylon was. That's where the Jews were. The Jews were captive by Nebuchadnezzar. They went to Babylon. They became prosperous, as they always do. They work hard. And they have strong family values. So in the Babylonian community, the Jews were prosperous and became influential. Jesus would have gone east. Father says that also. What's happening on the other side of the coin? Well, Buddha came to Nepal, India at that time, Nepal in the present day, and the main thrust of Buddhism at that time was westward. They couldn't cross the Himalayan mountains, so they went westward. And if you go into Pakistan, you'll see in the northern part of Pakistan, the Gandhara area, all Buddhist temples. Go further west into Afghanistan, and before the Taliban took over, they had the biggest statue of Buddha in the world, carved out of a mountain in Bamiyan. Christianity would have gone east, Buddhism was going west. Wow, these two religions, one that believes in God and one that believes in human responsibility. That would have been perfect. Instead, Jesus was crucified. This providence was lost. And Christianity went west. At the same time, Buddhism went east. So now they're going to go around the world. And this unity that should have taken place in what we call Persia probably today, in the Iranian area, has now been moved. Korea. One interesting point, if you look at the map of the United States, and lay over that the map of the Roman Empire. Similar size and shape. America is the second Rome. It's amazing, yeah? This is historians do this. We don't do this. We just look it up. So, the front line between communism and democracy. The DMZ is the front line between communism and democracy. The only the only divided nation still today. Communist North Korea, supported by China and the Soviet Union, invaded South Korea. Unprecedented. The United States, together with 21 other nations from the United Nations, 16 of them given military support. The others gave medical and humanitarian support. Supported South Korea. Unprecedented. Never before. The war lasted from 1950 to 1953, but this was not a civil war. It was a war between militant atheism and freedom-loving democracies. The conflict was among the most destructive wars in modern history, inflicting about 3 million casualties, the largest portion of civilian deaths, even more than World War II. Virtually all Korean major cities were destroyed. North Korea became one of the most heavily bombed countries in history. Why? Because they wouldn't surrender. They were defeated, but they wouldn't surrender. The Americans said, bomb them, bomb them. And then the planes went to bomb, and the pilots came back and said, there's nothing left. They said, if you find 2 bricks on top of each other, bomb them. And finally they surrendered. Virtually, North Korea became one of the most heavily bombed countries. This is why they have so much resentment as well. An estimated 1.5 million of its people fled the country. Still, no peace treaty was signed, making this a frozen conflict that we still have today. National indemnity period for Korea. The number 40 is this number to indemnify the mistakes made in human history. The first Israel had 40 years of slavery. The second Israel, 40 years of persecution under the Roman Empire. And the third Israel, 40 years of occupation by the Japanese. I know we have some Japanese here, but as I've read a little bit about this to try and understand what was really happening there. And the stories that were told were the Christians were particularly persecuted. If a preacher was talking and the police came in, they would cut out his tongue because he's using his tongue. And the people that were in the audience were listening, so chopsticks to puncture their ears. And this was happening, you know, I don't mean to, but it was a brutal, it was a difficult period, similar to Rome and the Egyptian slavery. Prophecies of Korea. In the Chungam Nook, there is a prophecy of a Korean-born king of perfect goodness and truth that will rule the world. And actually, because Korea is a Buddhist country, there's a strong expectation for the return of Buddha. Bodhisattva Maitreya is coming, and the art exhibits that. Rabindranath Tagore never went to Korea, but on his way back from Japan, as he was sailing past Korea, he wrote this poem. In the golden age of Asia, Korea was one of its lamp bearers, and that lamp is waiting to be lighted once again for the illumination of the East. And there is, of course, a statue of Tagore in Seoul, Korea. I want to share with you what Billy Graham said when he went to Korea. He wrote this foreword. The book was called Victory Through Persecution. Billy Graham did not write the book, but he wrote the foreword. The Korean church has set a pattern of perennial revival to which the church universal looks with wonder and amazement. It is refreshing to know that the spirit of revival still prevails in Korea and that the work of God there continues unabated. At the alarming rate of spiritual decline in the West, it is conceivable that God is getting Koreans ready to serve as missionaries to the Western church. For years, the flow of missionaries was from West to East, but it is possible that in the providence of God, that may be reversed in the future. In any event, the Korean church stands as a beacon of spiritual light in an area of darkness. He goes on to say, this book on the Korean revival gives us some of the fascinating stories of changed lives, transformed communities in a battle-scarred land. It is the saga of a people who have suffered, who have been persecuted, and have emerged as spiritual giants in an environment which only divine grace could make so productive. Lastly, a culture of moral values. This was from a newspaper in Korea. Filial piety was deeply rooted in Korea long before the arrival of Confucianism from China. In Korea, there is an expression, niri sarang. Anybody speak Korean? Niri sarang, which roughly translates as descending love. It expresses the notion that love is something pure, imparted from the parents to the child. Filial piety is the child to the parents, but this is the parents to the child. Do you know this knife? Have you ever seen it? When I went to Korea for the first time, I was amazed because I saw one of these knives. I wanted to buy my wife a gift. So I went to the shop and I looked something not too expensive and Korean. And I saw this. Well, I saw one like it anyway. A small Korean knife called unjangdo. Literally, silver knife. These are generally thought to have been worn by women, they wear them right on their chimonchogari, as utility knives for self-defense or for taking their own life when there is no option. So I asked the shopkeeper, I said, what is that for? He pulled it apart and it was a sheath and a knife. So you pull the sheath off and it's a knife. So I said, what's that for? He said, oh, the woman would protect herself. So I take the knife and I said, oh, she's going to defend herself against the attacker. Anio. She will kill herself before being defiled. I thought, wow. And I bought one and gave it to my wife. She still has it. All right. But I couldn't afford the silver, so I bought a wooden one. Anyway, so Korea. The life of Father Moon. There are basic prophecies that need to be fulfilled in Revelations. Open the scroll with 7 seals. That has to be fulfilled. Build a worldwide foundation, the 144,000 people. The beast of the earth, militant atheism, has to be addressed. Overcome the whore of Babylon, free sex. The marriage of the Lamb, and become the true parents is actually the most important. But he's got to accomplish all of these. Open the scroll with 7 seals. Over 9 years of prayer, research, and intense spiritual battles, Father Moon discovered and developed the most systematic, comprehensive biblical theology ever assembled. Jesus helped him along the way. In the end, Father Moon published Divine Principle and provided answers to unsolved problems. One of the last pieces of his theological puzzle was the question why God, who is all-knowing, all-good, and all-powerful, did not stop his children from falling. There are 7 basic areas that the principle talks about. The first big one, the purpose and principle of creation. I think that's major. Next, the cause and consequences of the human fall. Then, of course, the mission of Jesus. There are major theological issues that are talked about. Eschatology, the last days, resurrection, Christology, and predestination. Then the principles of restoration and the historical parallels that we've looked at, and finally, the second coming.
7 scrolls.
The 7 scrolls have been unsealed. The returning Lord must build a worldwide foundation. Father Moon's legacy of peace building. Some of the organizations mentioned here have been merged or liquidated, but they stand as a legacy of Father Moon's life and worldwide initiative. Educational initiative. If someone establishes even one university, they are successful. Father Moon established many. The motto of his educational institutions, love God, love humanity, and love your country. Sun Moon University in Korea. Sun Moon Academy for the arts, performing arts. Chungchim International Middle School and High School. Chungchim Divinity School. In America, the University of Bridgeport was resuscitated through Father Moon's investment, and he established the Unification Theological Seminary. Sports and art activities. If someone establishes one sports team or one entertainment company, they are successful. Father Moon established many of them. He said that heaven is expressed through the arts. Mother Moon put it this way in her memoir. People often think that politics moves the world, but that is not the case. It is culture and art that move the world. It is emotion, not reason, that touches people in their innermost being. When hearts become receptive, theologies, ideologies, and political regimes can change. He established sports teams, soccer teams, professional soccer teams in Korea and in Brazil. Sun Moon Peace Cup, Play Soccer, Make Peace, and Martial Arts. And here you see a picture of Father Moon with Pele in his home in Korea, in Father Moon's home. Tongil Sports was initiated, the Peace Cup among soccer players, and not to be outdone, the Peace Queen Cup. The Little Angels, the premier performing arts group in Korea that have gone around the world and performed for heads of state all over the world, including the Queen of England, the Universal Ballet Company, the New York City Symphony. Medical activities. If someone establishes even one hospital, they are successful. Father Moon established the Chungchim International Hospital, combining Eastern and Western medicines, as he did in the Ishin Hospital in Tokyo. And he, in rebuilding Bridgeport, invested heavily in the chiropractic school. This is the only university in America where you can get a college degree in chiropractic medicine. You can get, certificates outside, but only in Bridgeport can you get a college degree. Yeah. And it also has the largest international student body of any university in America. The A1 Welfare Society for the needy children and underprivileged. Chungshim Hospital for the elderly, called Silvertown. Peace activities. If Father Moon establishes even one peace movement, they are successful. If somebody, and Father Moon established many. He called for the renewing of the United Nations to build lasting peace in August of 2000, saying that the United Nations should have a bicameral system, one of them representing the political side, but the religions also need to be represented there. Why? Because religions have more influence than politicians. And their influence, they're not elected for 4 or 5 years and change. The religious leaders are there and they stay. The Pope stays until he dies, basically. When Father Moon established the Universal Peace Federation in 2005, he came to 120 nations in about 4 months. That's almost one country per month, and he's 90 years old at that time. Unbelievable. Here he is in the Philippines being received by Gloria Macapagal Arroyo in the presidential palace, Malacañang Palace at that time. Interreligious cooperation and harmony. There have been, I think, 120 different pilgrimages to the Middle East to work to bring together these Abrahamic faiths, the Assembly of World Religions, interreligious cooperation, and the World Scripture that has been established. Father Moon established with Mother Moon as the first president the Women's Federation for World Peace to bring together the healing power of women's love. Youth and sports, CARP, Pure Love, and the Youth and Students for Peace. Father Moon said the most serious social problems are youth problems and family breakdown. We've got to address those problems. He established long ago the International Relief and Friendship Foundation, involved in primary education, poverty eradication, service projects, humanitarian relief, health care programs, and medical camps. He established the Ocean Challenge for young people. Father Moon loved the ocean and said young people should go out because it's very tough. It's very hard on the ocean. This is good training for young people to overcome selfishness and be willing to learn to sacrifice. Father Moon established 3 organizations that have consultative status with the Economic and Social Council of the United Nations. One for youth, one for political leaders, and one for women. He initiated building a bridge between Russia and the United States and Alaska called the Bering Highway Bridge and Tunnel Project. Father Moon said, this tunnel will help make the world a single community. Think of how much money the world is wasting on war. The time has come for nations to work together, pool their resources, and, as the prophet Isaiah taught, beat their swords into plowshares and pruning hooks, and established the Peace Palace where he has, and now Mother Moon has, international delegates come. Medical media activities. If someone establishes one media house, they are successful. Father Moon called the media the conscience of society. The media must be free and must be self-governing. And a self-governing media must also be a moral media. A moral media must lead the fight against drug abuse, pornography, and the many other destructive vices of society. Thus, media must become the conscience of society. Father Moon has established 3 daily newspapers, national daily newspapers, in the 3 capitals of Washington, D.C., Seoul, Korea, and Tokyo, Japan. He used to have and own the United Press International, many newspapers in Latin and South America, and we have here also the Middle East Times. The beast of the earth, militant atheism. This is the point in Revelations that talks about really the rise of communism. It also forced all people, great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive the mark on their right hand or on their forehead, so that they could not buy or sell unless they had the mark, which is the name of the beast and the name of its number. That number is 666. Why 666? The 6th day was when mankind was created in the 6 days of creation. Taking that total formation, growth, and completion, completely encapsulating that even on a national level, then you get this 666. This is a hallmark of communism. You cannot work, you cannot think unless you're a member of the Communist Party, in essence. The peaceful opposition to and the assimilation of communism. Father Moon founded more activities for the peaceful opposition of communism than anyone in human history. Starting in the 1960s, the International Federation for Victory Over Communism, the World Anti-League, was hosted by the VOC program in Tokyo in 1960. Father Moon had the World Rally for Korean Freedom in 1975, at that time the largest gathering of Koreans at that time in Yoido Island with 1.2 million people. Father Moon reached out to former U.S. President Dwight Eisenhower and U.S. President Richard Nixon, explaining and hoping that they could understand the threat of communism. Father Moon held the God Bless America Festival. 300,000 people attended the Washington Monument Rally in 1976. He continued his work with the Professors World Peace Academy and had a program in Switzerland, and the hotel was opposite from the Soviet embassy. And Father Moon had the conference, The End of the Soviet Empire. Long stories there, let's not go into that. Father Moon has vast experience being imprisoned in a communist prison camp. He has a massive outreach, the deepest heart, the most personal resources invested, the longest commitment, and the sincerest heart. He doesn't seek retaliation, but cooperation. He predicted the downfall of communism and said it would not prosper beyond 70 years. Indeed, in 1987, its 70th year, it was falling. Father reached out to Mikhail Gorbachev, the last leader of the Soviet Union, in 1980, and a year later to Kim Il-sung in North Korea. Here's a picture of Father Moon with Kim Il-sung walking hand in hand. President Kim and I each held each other's hand as we walked down the hallway and took commemorative photographs. Then I left the residence. After I had gone, I was told that President Kim told his son, Kim Jong-il, President Moon is a great man. I've met many people in my life, but none were like him. He has a broad scale of thinking, and he overflows with heart. I felt close to him. It made me feel good to be with him, and I wanted him to stay for a long time. I want to meet him again. After I die, if there are things to discuss pertaining to the North-South relations, you must always seek the advice of President Moon. And North Korea, when Father Moon died, sent this wreath from North Korea by Kim Jong-un, unprecedented for North Korean to acknowledge anyone from South Korea. On top of that, they gave Father Moon the National Reunification Award from the North Korean government. When Father Moon had gone there to meet Kim Il-sung, he was also invited to visit his home where he grew up. Next, overcoming the whore of Babylon, free sex. Come, and I will show you the punishment of the great prostitute who sits by many waters. With her the kings of the earth committed adultery, and the inhabitants of the earth were intoxicated with the wine of her adulteries. Father Moon began this mission himself with his own marriage in 1960. He took 2 photographs and wore 2 dresses, one a white tuxedo and the other the Korean traditional dress, because he said he's getting married not for himself, but for East and West. Marriage is a tough time, your marriage day. You're exhausted, and he's doing it twice on one day. That's amazing. Started then with the 36 blessed couple in 1960, the 72 blessed couple, 124 blessed couple, 430 blessed couple, 777 blessed couple, 1,800 blessed couple, the 30,000 blessed couples in Korea, 360,000 blessed couples. And whenever Father Moon has these, you can see on the stage, he's not doing it himself. He does not stand alone. Religious leaders are there with Father Moon. And you can see a Hindu, a Buddhist, a Catholic, a Jew, a Muslim, and a Sikh. They're all there together. Father Moon built the second largest indoor stadium in Asia and said, let's hold a wedding there. Father Moon went to the United Nations in 2001 with this blessing, inviting 210 couples from 135 nations, each asking them to dress in their native costumes. If you see the stage, which you can't see easily here, I'll zoom in on that. Behind Father and Mother Moon dressed in their native Korean, you see a Buddhist, a Sikh, a Jew, and a Native American Indians, and there are others. Father Moon does not stand alone. This is not for his self-aggrandizement, it's meant to bring the world's religions together. All religions honor marriage and family. Immorality and licentiousness in the personal lives of adults ultimately destroys the lives of their children. The reason today's society does not have a level of happiness to match its level of material affluence is that families are being destroyed. And this is Father Moon's effort to rebuild the family. Building a world of peace under intense persecution. Together, side by side, for 53 years, Father and Mother Moon endured an unprecedented level of misunderstanding by governments, religious organizations, resentful individuals, along with the ridicule, relentless ridicule by the media. They not only endured, they prospered. Together, building a successful worldwide foundation, they addressed major roadblocks to world peace while under the most adverse environment imaginable. Father Moon's unjust imprisonments. Gyeonggi-do prison for 5 months in South Korea. Jeongju Kwansong prison for 7 days, and again in North Korea. Daemun prison for 100 days. Again in North Korea. Hungnam prison, 2 years and 8 months. Sarimun prison in South Korea. And in America, 13 months in Danbury. Altogether, 4 years, 8 months, and 17 days. Father Moon was originally arrested because of his anti-Japanese activities. He was protesting the Japanese occupation. So he was a patriot, and he got arrested. When he was in North Korea, he was arrested as a spy because when he came from South Korea, he had some money in his pocket, which was South Korean currency, and they said he's a spy and arrested him. Rearrested and put into 2 years and 8 months in Hungnam prison because of jealous Christians. Saudi Moon prison because of draft evasion. They realized that Father Moon did not participate in the draft because he was a prisoner in North Korea at that time. And U.S. Danbury tax evasion, we'll talk a little bit about it in just a few slides. The media bias, when Father Moon was in prison, it was front page story. When he was later acquitted, hidden on the inside pages. In Hungnam prison for 2 years and 8 months, Father Moon recounts this. After undergoing torture and returning to my dark cell on a moonless night, I cleaned my wounds and offered appreciation to heaven. I could not cry for myself, only for Heavenly Father, who shed blood and tears for humankind. These are some of the tortures that Father Moon went through. Overcoming unjust imprisonment, forced labor, torture in a North Korean prison camp. I went to Cambodia and saw the killing fields in Cambodia. Same. It came from the same source. Communists came. Wow. Religious persecution. This book, Inquisition, written by Carlton Sherwood, a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist. The Unification Church members were and continue to be the victims of the worst kind of religious prejudice and racial bigotry this country has witnessed in over a century. Sherwood wanted to write an expose against the church, so he was thinking, I'm going to expose the church as they're all hypocrites. And he went to investigate the church. It later turned out he wrote this book defending us because he realized we are persecuted unjustly. The Congress, the court, the law enforcement agencies, the press were part of a determined effort to wipe out this movement. When Father Moon was released, 1,800 religious leaders came for a Freedom of Religion banquet in Washington, D.C. Father Moon could talk about the helicopter crash, that a miracle that no one died, or most of them, no one was even injured, really, at the helicopter crash. And you can see the 5 survivors of his immediate family there in that photograph. Father Moon's personal victory. His most important victory is he was a filial son to heaven. The world record of the heart of a filial son. More published volumes of prayers than any other religious leaders. There are 12 published volumes of Father Moon's prayers entitled The Lifetime of Conversation with Our Heavenly Father. As a true teacher, there are 1,200 volumes of Father Moon's sermons and speeches. Relentlessly, he was talking day and night. This was a poem that he wrote when he was 15 years old. When I doubt people, I feel pain. When I judge people, it is unbearable. When I hate people, there's no value to my existence. Yet if I believe, I am deceived. If I love, I am betrayed. Suffering and grieving tonight, my head in my hand, am I wrong? Yes, I'm wrong. Even though we are deceived, still believe. Though we are betrayed, still forgive. Love completely those who hate you. Wipe your tears away and welcome with a smile those who know nothing but deceit and those who betray without regret. Oh, Master, the pain of loving, look at my hands. Place your hand on my chest. My heart is bursting. Such agony. But when I loved those who acted against me, I brought victory. Just like Jesus on the cross. If you have done the same thing, I will give you the crown of glory. Jesus, I will give you all of my inheritance. Even now, at this time, 90 years of age, I wonder every day why God called me. Of all the people in the world, why did he choose me? It wasn't because I had a particularly good appearance or outstanding character or a deep conviction. I was just an unremarkable, stubborn, foolish young boy. If God saw something in me, it must have been a sincere heart that sought him with tears of love. Reverend Moon once gave a sermon 17 hours long with no break. This is not that sermon, the picture of that sermon. I think I was there one time in Hanamdong. And we went there. Usually you go in the morning, even at 5 o'clock, and you sit on the lawn outside. And I was outside and it was dark. And Father Moon began to talk. And the sun rose. And I thought, it's breakfast time. It's been 2 hours. I mean, it's breakfast time. Yeah. He continued. And then the sun was overhead. And I thought, well, brunch, lunch, okay, something. Whatever you call it, it's time to eat. He continued talking. The sun set. And then I thought to myself, I experienced the earth turning. Just sitting there. I could, through that. And, you know, Father Moon also one time, 22 hours when he was older, Hunduke. And after this 22-hour session, everybody went to bed, I think around 2 o'clock, thinking, well, no, there's going to be no Hunduke the next morning. We've already done it. And 2 hours later, knock on the door, Father Moon's waiting for you again. This is his life. People understand. He who conquers. This is Father Moon. This is his spirit. Oh, the marriage supper of the Lamb, the most important legacy, is not his victory over persecution, not the universities or the medical institutions or the performing arts. This is his greatest victory. Father and Mother Moon, at their holy wedding of the true parents, the marriage of the Lamb, April 11th, 1960 in Seoul, Korea. That is his greatest victory. And Mother Moon is going to re-celebrate that. We'll talk about it in the next presentation. Father Moon lived for 92 years, from 1920 to 1912. Mother Moon is saying goodbye to her husband of 53 years at his memorial service. Celebrations were conducted in 194 nations. There were 8.2 million people mourned or prayed for Father Moon after he died. Those who physically came to Korea, 215,000 people came. There was a 2-week period from his death until his Songhwa ceremony. people that attended the funeral, there were 50,000 people. 25,000 outside and 25,000 inside. This is Father Moon's casket being brought in. And the memorial service with Mother Moon sitting there and the empty chair to her right where Father Moon normally sits. Father and Mother Moon, this is their legacy. This chronicle, this whole presentation, was played out by 2 refugees from North Korea in a war-torn, divided country that is technically still at war 7 decades later. Even more astonishing, they constructed this foundation while Father Moon underwent 6 imprisonments in 3 nations and was barred from entering either Europe or neighboring Japan. This is a testimony to their enduring love for God and for each other. Thank you. I went too long. Sorry about that. Anyway, but that was a long one. You know, that's important, so thank you. Sorry about that. Let's take a break. Or, first of all, do you have any questions or comments that you might like to share?
So, in the book of John,
Yeah.
on the Christ, Jesus on the cross, he said, "It is finished." I wonder if somebody told that, somebody gives some kind of question that why this Jesus, it is finished, he said, why he need to come back to do something else or something.
Well, that's the answer. I mean, if it's finished, why does he have to come back? And "it is finished" refers to his victory, really, at the crucifixion. The crucifixion is victorious. Yes, it's finished. It's victorious. I believe that. But he also said he wanted to do many other things and talk about many other things. So I think both are true. You don't have to choose one or the other. They're both true. It's finished, and he wanted to do more things. When you graduate from high school, it's finished. Does that mean you don't go on to college? No, I mean, it's finished means you've laid the foundation, more can be built on top of that. That's what it means, yeah.
And Dr. Kittel, that you mentioned that like a Christianity need to go east. If Jesus was not crucified, he need to go east. That's true because that he's talking that he was speaking the Aramaic language. Aramaic is the one language of Babylon.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Oh, thank you.
So that's why that if Jesus go there, everybody understand. Like a father came to Japan, like a same thing.
Interesting.
So, and one thing that like Saul, King Saul, the Bible said that King Saul was 1 head taller than anybody else. And Charlemagne was I checked that with Wikipedia. Charlemagne was 6'10".
Wow.
So quite tall than. So same position. And so that's the interesting similarity, that the same position that King Saul was very tall. Charlemagne was very tall too.
Oh, King
Saul,
Saul?
was the king of the.
Yeah, Saul David Solomon, the United Kingdom, yeah.
And Charlemagne,
And
the
Charlemagne.
same position.
Oh, really?
And the Bible said that King Saul was 1 head taller than anybody else.
Oh,
Charlemagne was 6'10".
wow.
So quite tall.
That time people were small.
I mean, he's a giant at that time, yes. I mean, I didn't know that. I will keep that. I collect things, as people
And
say.
one more thing that the Dr. Kittel, so that the book of John, that Jesus mentioned that he will be put on the cross as Moses put on bronze serpent.
Right.
And if we check that how Moses, that the bronze serpent was really last miracle he made before he died. So when he made the bronze serpent, God always told him he will die. He cannot cross the Jordan River. And so that Moses' prayer at the end, looking at the Jordan River, was, I think that like a similarity to that Jesus prayer in Gethsemane. And Moses didn't pray that I'm afraid to die. Moses prayed, God, let me see you fulfill the mission. This is the mission you gave to me. Let me see you did that. So that is Moses' prayer. So I think that actually that the New Testament didn't mention that why Jesus prayed like that. But through that Moses' course, we can see that we can assume that.
If you can send me something more on that later, I would like that, because I understand what you're saying, but I can't. I want to know the details in the Bible verses that would go. I would appreciate that. I apologize taking a little bit long. Let's take a short break and then come back. Another comment?
It's not so much
If you need a break, please go ahead.
it's not so much a question, but I really appreciate